Hello and welcome to the Radical World Podcast. I'm Jose Leal, and today I'm joined by the man with only one name, Watson, uh, from Texas, correct?
Right, Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas.
hmm
It's a beautiful city. I've never been. I've been
mm
to Dallas, but never Austin. Watson is a member owner at Volk Co-op and has been a member for 14 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So Um, we wanted to talk to Watson because, well, first of all, he's the one that said, I'm willing to talk on behalf of Volk. And
hmm
I don't know if that's common for you to be the voice of the organization.
Yeah, it is normally.
So the idea for me with talking to co-ops is one to understand sort of like what drove them to be a co-op. And the other is to talk about how co-ops are evolving because the co-op movement is a very old movement and it hasn't changed much in the last 100 plus years. And we're seeing that there's a transformation that's happening now. And I'm wondering if you're sensing that transformation, that it's opening up and becoming a little bit more technological. It's becoming a little bit more peer to peer, and so wanted to have that conversation. But first, tell us about you, Watson. What brought you to co-ops? What's your background? What got you being such a motivated person about the co-op movement and that space?
Okay. Yeah, so I'm a computer programmer by trade. It's really the only job I've ever had. When I was 16 years old, I joined the Marine Corps and I got a contract for to be a computer programmer. So I was a computer programmer in the Marine Corps. Um, and so that's really the only thing I've ever done all my life. Um, I've noticed over the years, since when I got out and I became a more of a contractor, and I noticed that things seem to be a little bit unfair when you work with consultancies. I had an intuition of that, and around town in Austin, a bunch of us started talking and thinking, hey, we're working, and we're really working to help the owner retire. Uh, we really probably should make that more equitable. And around that time, um, Richard Wolf was doing a bunch of talks about cooperatives. So I was down in many different rabbit holes trying to think about how to reason about making a more fair system using game theory and all these other things. And then I saw Richard Wolf and said, oh yeah, this looks like something that's a lot more simple than what I was thinking of. And let me move over here and advocate for this. So we started a consultancy that was a cooperative.
And how did that come about? Like, were you guys already sort of working together, or you kind of had to assemble the team? How big is the team now at Volk?
So there's four member owners and somewhere around 15 or so people that come in and go out. The way that we work, though, is everyone that wants to participate in the decision making process can, and they have the binding capability in the decision making process. So we try to advocate for people to come in, and it's a whole lot. It might be about 80% advocacy for cooperatives and training
Hmm.
for people to be to participate versus maybe like 20%, like um, do they have the capability or not? So a lot of people who are contractors, they like being individual. So
Right.
oftentimes it's not so much the cooperative thing, um and that being strange. It's more, you know they're kind of used to, oh, just I just want to be paid, and I don't want to really be part of the decision making process. We can
And
talk about that if you care about that.
two questions, because it starts me thinking about the idea of if there's only four member owners, what's keeping the others from becoming member owners? And then to your point, like, why is it that some folks, why do you think they're not really interested in the governance side of things?
Yeah. It, so it's interesting when you let people come in and see how the sausage is made. Uh, it's kind of like um, people see that, say we're talking about computer programmers, right? So computer programmers, couple things. They're hostile to sales. They're hostile to marketing. They think that marketing is lying. They think that sales is lying. That kind of thing,
They're
right?
probably right, right?
Well, I mean, if you're a consultant and you're the one doing the sales, then it's like you want to try not to lie. You want to try to say that, hey, I'm providing value here. I think that you have a problem that needs to be solved. It's probably you're not solving it in the most efficient way. These types of things. You can do
Mhm.
anything the a bad way or a good way,
Right.
honest way or dishonest way. Everything that I just said, this is a conversation that you have with every single, probably any field, but
Right.
computer programmer. It's kind of like, hey, so we need to allocate a certain amount to marketing. You if someone wants to write a blog or someone wants to go do a talk or whatever, they should be paid for it. That kind of thing. And then someone says, wait a minute, I kind of like just getting paid. So I don't want to allocate. So you have to convince, right? All of the things that are part of the executive function are when you bring someone on board, you're having to convince them of doing that. That's one problem.
Hmm.
Another problem is like, hey, I just want to write software. I don't want to do anything else.
Right.
And so you're kind of um, one of the things I'm passionate about is convincing someone or educating someone on how much they are exploited. So saying, hey, there's this concept of the surplus. It's the extra. If you sell the widget for $10, and all the workers and everything cost $6, that $4, that's the surplus. Who gets to decide
The
where the
profit.
surplus goes? Yeah, the extra. You should have a say in that, and convincing someone that, oh, I should have a say in that. It's actually kind of difficult.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Most
right.
people are programmed not to think about that.
Yeah.
Right. We've
It's
been programmed as a society to think that that's normal, that that is the way things work.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You say programmed, and I would say that I want to say one step further, and I call it obscene. It's an obscene discussion to bring up that, oh, you have the right to decide where the surplus goes. If you're really in the West, definitely an American, you've been programmed to use your language to not talk about the surplus. You believe, hey, no, I agreed when I joined that this employee employer contract, I agreed to just get this hourly wage, But every now and then there's this contradiction that happens where someone says, you know what, you know, uh, I created this really good piece of software. I created Gmail for Google. That's worth at least $10 billion. The guy that created Gmail, no, he's not. He's not a billionaire. He's 100 million, but not billion. What's going on there, right? That kind of thing. You
Well, and
know.
I think, I mean, you bring up a beautiful point, because it is the fact that you're having to open up the Pandora's box of our society,
Mhm.
that we've built these expectations, these structures, these processes that are built on uh, the idea that we can dominate others,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
control and domination. And that to us seems normal. Of course, there needs to be somebody who's dominant. There, my in my family, the father was dominant. In
mhm,
my work, my boss is dominant.
mhm,
And in our companies and our environment, there's this whole role of dominance
mhm.
that we don't actually see in nature. We think we
Right.
do. We
Mhm,
think we do. Like in the
mhm,
case of the wolf, we always thought that the leader of the pack was dominant in ways that we've modeled, but it's actually not true. For example, when they're traveling, the dominant wolf actually sits in the back to protect and make sure that the rest of the clan is healthy and safe and doesn't drop off and doesn't get attacked and so on and so forth. They're not actually leading where to go.
mhm,
They're allowing the pack to go where it needs to go, but making sure that their role is to serve the pack.
mhm.
And we don't we don't seem to have that as a model of, we like the idea of the lone wolf CEO that goes out and tells people what to do and fires people because they need to be fired and all of this kind of stuff.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
I guess what you're describing to me, from a standpoint of um, teaching, educating folks, is that this process of unlearning this, what we call the fiat system, a system of imposition, where someone has the right to tell us what is doable and what's not doable,
mhm,
is
mhm.
a difficult conversation to have. Have you been having that conversation for 14 years?
Oh, I feel like I've been having it for longer, but yeah, I've been changing the terms. I've been trying to use and leverage um, recently more political science terms uh, in order to try to communicate what's going on there. But yeah, it's quite difficult. And I will um, say this, which may be shocking. Sometimes there's a way to frame the discussion. Sometimes it's actually more difficult to talk to people who are within the community about things like elitism and decision making process than it is outside of the community. Because I found that sometimes if we one of the things that if we're committed to saying that people should make decisions within some type of participatory process where it's authentic.
Mm-hmm.
um, when you dig deep, you'll find sometimes people that are wanting to include people in the decision making process. They're actually wanting the benefits of including, and they don't want the negatives. Like what I was talking about earlier would be a negative. It's oh, it's slow. You got to get, but when people are on board, they're on board. You have the buy-in. But that's the benefit. But the negative is it's slow. It's like,
We've got to
hey,
sell it to the team.
right, right. But I have found that oftentimes getting people on board, hey, it's cooperative, everybody will just love each other, that kind of that's there's a whole slice of group that loves that and they're on board, but they're elitist oftentimes. Not they're elitist, but there's a group that is elitist. What I mean by that, if I will define elitism with like a political science type definition, if you believe that people really don't have the capacity to delegate, let's say, to delegate, uh, I'm not really good at deciding if nukes, how we should stop the proliferation of nukes. I don't think people are good at that, at deciding when to delegate it to an expert. It should just be top down. It's an expert, and I'm using the definition from Robert Dahl, political science he wrote on democracy. If you believe that people generally they're not capable of delegating expertise to an expert, then you're an elitist. I found that that's not a thing that
Right.
is always, you could say, if you want to use terms like left and right and all these types of, that's not a thing for the just the right. That's on the left too. That people, well, if you go talk with people who are academics and stuff, oh no, I, I'm an expert. I don't want to. It should be like if I'm an expert on something medical, or I'm an expert on nukes, or on something. No, it shouldn't be a participatory vote or
Right.
discussion. I should just get. I should just be given the capability. There should be no decision making process that delegates to me. That is
And
difficult.
I totally get that, and I see that because part of our system, as I said, is there is this whole idea that when people get placed in a role, that that role has the power,
Hmm.
right? I'm the expert on X. I'm the doctorate on X. I'm the master's on X. And therefore, I have the ability to be the one that understands this better than anyone else. And therefore, I'm the one that needs to be able to make those decisions. No different than the CEO said, I got hired as a CEO. I'm the one that not only should make these decisions, I'm the only one that can make these decisions. And we we lose the sense that there are a whole bunch of people out there that are sensing and responding to an environment that you as the CEO has no clue is happening.
Hmm.
You don't know what really is happening. I mean, in your world, do you know what's happening at the code level in your colleagues' projects?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right?
Right.
If you were a CEO, you wouldn't.
Right.
You'd be too disconnected from the work because your role wouldn't be to do the work. Your role would be to tell people to do the work.
Right. Right. Right.
And
Now,
when you're that disconnected, you can't make decisions that are really in touch with the reality that's happening.
Now, I would classify what you're talking about is uh, something more in the efficiency, uh, on the efficiency side. So, an argument for saying, "Oh, the decision making process needs to be more inclusive because the people that are closer to the problem have more information about that problem, and so they should be included in the decision making process." Now, what I was talking about is a bit different,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Agreed.
It's saying that, wait a minute, there is a such thing as an expert, right? And someone has the capability not so much to say, I know, like that's why I use nukes, right? People
Mm-hmm.
tend to say, I don't know how to make a nuclear facility, right, for energy. I I don't want to argue about the color of the facility or whatever, but I don't, if I want to have the right to say I don't want it in my backyard, right? And people feel like they have the capability. I think they do. I think they have the capability of saying, I don't want it in my backyard, or I do want it in my backyard. I want to vote on that or whatever. Right. That's really what I'm talking about. Being the capability of delegating and um taking that uh if you delegate, you also have the ability to take the power back at
Right.
any time. If you believe that and people have it, then you're good. In my opinion, you're not an elitist.
Well, and I understand your point about
Yeah.
the distinction between those two things,
Hmm.
but I also think, and I'm just going to jump to sort of a slightly different, well, I think a tangent from what we're talking about,
Hmm.
which is that all too often we have this idea that we need to make a decision, that a choice needs to be made, rather than allowing for the evidence to make the choice.
Hmm.
Right? Like in coding, you try a path. It's not the most efficient path, or it's not the best way to get whatever the results is for that function. And you don't necessarily need to sit down and say, make a decision. You need to build a prototype that works, test another prototype and come to the best way that you can, because that's what is proven. That's what you can build. That's what gets you the results that you're seeking.
Mhm.
And all too often, we try to predict by making a decision at a stage prior to the experiment,
Sure. Yeah.
right? The
Of course.
answer is going to
Oh, yeah.
be X. And then
Yeah.
we hold on to that prediction,
Mhm.
right? And we're
Yeah.
like, the answer is X. And I'm holding on to that prediction. And it's like, why don't we let go of predictions a little bit? It's good to have a hypothesis. It's good to test that hypothesis, but let's not hold on to it as if it is gospel. And instead, work with these predictions as hypotheses that we can test out, validate, and get the right answers. And if we do that, then we're not making decisions. We're allowing for the environment to actually dictate what works and what doesn't.
This is correct. And this would be closer to the on the side of the efficiency, which I feel like you can argue more participatory decision making, and I can talk about within political science how they define decision making, and I
Mhm.
find it to be very interesting for this discussion. You can argue that, oh, the command and control, which I know that this is a thing that I've seen on a couple of the podcasts that you all have had. It's something that I'm hostile to. I want to try to
Right.
delegate and have people more involved and all of these things like that. But it's actually kind of easy to pull people into the, hey, let delegate the decision making down, delegate it, but not having it. And I'll talk about what
Mhm.
the different types of decision making: full, partial, and pseudo. Pseudo decision making is when, and this may be controversial, but this is a political science definition. Carol Pateman is in the participatory democracy. Her book on that is where I'm getting this from. Pseudo participation, management loves it. They say they see the outcomes. Management science. Oh, we get more buy-in
Right.
from pseudo participation. What is that? Everyone in the room and they're hearing. Maybe they don't get full information, but they don't have binding decision making power. They're in to hear, and um they participate, but they don't have a final say, they don't have a final vote, all these things. Pseudo participation works well with management. They can be sold on that. Full participation, where people have binding power, and binding power on what? The surplus. It's,
In part,
who
yeah.
cares if it's whatever, the surplus, think resources. When they have binding decision making power on things that they help build, oh, management doesn't like that. So that's where I feel like the brunt of the discussion, persuasion, everything should be. The part with the pseudo participation or partial, where it's like partial would be where all we have it's kind of consensus making, but veto from management,
Right. Of course.
right? That kind of thing. Oh, they have the final say at the end. Partial, they could be on in on that too. They could be convinced of that. Pseudo and partial. Partial's harder. Uh, but full, no, they don't like it.
No. Well, it
Mhm.
can't happen within that structure, right?
Yeah.
It
Well,
cannot happen.
yeah, it's not. If it's full participation, it's not command and control. But,
It's well,
but yeah.
then you don't really have the normal fiat structure, because the fiat structure says it's a top down
Yeah.
process,
Yeah.
and that's all there is to it. So if you change that process, then it's no longer that type of structure. So how do you guys do it? What do you and your colleagues? You've got the 4 member owners. Is there decisions that exist at that level, and then decisions that exist organization wide, or how does that work for you guys?
Everybody can come in on Friday. Friday is business day. Getting more work, getting more customers, whatever. Something weird. The sausage is being made on Friday. People, we invite people in. We do Robert's rules. We go around, do your proposal. You got 5 minutes, and then people go around and discuss pros and cons, whatever.
Mhm.
Try to keep it short. It can get long, but things that matter, which is, that's why people would even bring it up as a proposal. People get to vote. So if that's the process where people can see that and say, "Oh, this is participation. I like it," or "I don't like it." But that's really that's how I even recommend, because I've helped other people start cooperatives. Uh, that's how I recommend to try to bring people in. Um,
And
yeah,
if
that's a way.
there's, let's say there's something that the four of you don't really like, and there's 6 or 7 of the members that are not owner members advocate for. How does that
Yeah,
work?
you have the opposite problem. It's a faux problem. I would love for to have 7 members participate. I would love that. No, you don't have that problem. You have a problem where people don't want to come in on a Friday and vote and or engage and all that. That's the problem.
Right.
It's like arguing about you have too much money. What are we gonna do if we have too much money? Stop it, right?
Right.
No, I would love for too many people to be participating. It would be literally for me, someone like me, that's the same problem as having too much money. I would love it.
So, Watson, I've been toying with this conversation for some time with other folks around uh, the question of framing of co-ops.
Mhm.
And my sense is you you might be the right person to have this conversation with on air,
Yeah. Okay.
because one of the things that I've sensed about co-ops is there's still this idea that we are workers.
Mhm.
It's a worker co-op, and that workers, it's kind of like we've beheaded the beast, but we're still the beast. We're still doing the work, and we're still workers, and we're just workers. We just want to be workers. Let's leave us alone. Let us be
Mhm.
workers. And rather than sort of, I like to call it a peer-to-peer structure,
Mhm.
right? A network structure where everybody participates in everything. There is no sort of leadership in a traditional form, and that the ethos is come on in and play a role as a peer,
Mm.
not as, sort of, you've got the, in technological terms, you've got the server and you've got the clients, right? It's sort of like we keep repeating that pattern no matter what we do.
Mhm.
um, in a peer-to-peer environment, you don't need to have that server to tell us what to do. We sort of
Mhm.
negotiate as a peer.
Yeah, I
Does
I
that
agree.
does
No,
that
we are on the same page. We're completely on the same page. Like you really want the same things that I want. I just uh kind of make affordances for people to say, "Oh, we like hierarchies." You can still have a hierarchy. You can vote a president. You can do whatever. You can do all that. You can have a republic. In the Mondragon, they vote the CEO, president, all that. You can go right on from top down. It works with a company that has 150,000 people in it.
yeah.
That I just go ahead and go all the way back there. But I want it flat.
But
I
let me
want
go
it
back to
flat as
Mondragon.
possible.
Let
Go
me go
ahead.
back to Mondragon for a second, because then I want
Hmm.
your opinion about it.
Hmm.
Like Mondragon, it's not unusual for regular protests in the streets, strikes by their own
Yeah,
membership,
yeah. They have
right?
unions. They have
Unions,
unions.
and they
Yeah,
co-own the damn thing. Like, how does this even
yeah. They have
right?
unions, but you know what I bet? They don't have union busters. They don't have people, they don't have the management calling in specialized union. I don't know how familiar you are with the
Hmm.
whole union back. They don't have people who are uh coming in that specialize, get paid $2,000 an hour to bust the union. The
Right.
management, though, the people will come through and vote like, no, we didn't vote for that on the balance sheet and all that. No, now just you have one faction against another faction that they're saying we want this, and these other people are like, we created this resource. You don't get to have a say. All of
But
that, I don't have no problem with that.
so yeah, so tell me about the flatness, because I think that co-ops and having management and having the workers is still a problem.
Well, I will go with Richard Wolf. He says that you're going to talk about, there's different types of co-ops. You got producer co-ops, consumer co-ops, and all that.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
now within a worker co-op, like what you're saying, using that language, he's like, oh, worker-owned co-ops. There's worker-owned co-ops, one type. Worker-managed co-ops, that's one more. And there's worker-directed co-ops. Worker-directed co-ops, they're the ones who get everybody has a right to vote on the surplus. When you that word is useful. You can use profit if you want, but everyone has the right to do that. And so what are challenges with that? If you didn't grow, and this is a Richard Wolf, from studying the evolution of co-ops.
Hmm.
If you one challenge is to go from a traditional management style and convert to a co-op. Well, what's the challenge? Well, everybody's an owner now. Yeah. Okay, well, everyone's a man. You didn't grow up learning how to manage. That whole thing I said earlier about, hey, we should do some marketing. No, I want to get paid more, right? You have to grow up with that pain and learn all of those things. Then you have an advantage, and you have the
Right.
buy-in, all of these other things. Someone comes in with a great, you know, idea, or they went off and accomplished something and brought it back to the co-op and said, here, um, this ended up working. Uh, Maybe compensate me for it, or whatever, something like that. I took the risk on. Everyone joined it. There's many ways to challenge or try to deal with that problem of voting on surplus and all
Yeah.
that thing. But the worker directed one, that's the one that's addressing what you're saying. We don't like the language of use, like with worker and all that. But when you say worker directed, that's the one where at the very least with him, he's saying you at least get to vote the person that's going to do directed, but you're going to have to be knowledgeable about surplus, where it goes, and all this stuff like that. If you grew up being exploited, grew up, in your work life, you don't have a chance against someone who's their whole life, they've their competency is exploiting people. You have
Right.
no chance.
Yeah.
You won't even, it's a
Exactly.
Jedi mind trick. Don't look at the surplus. There is no droids here. You will have
Right.
no chance.
I so we wrote this book, wherever that book right there, called Radical Companies, and
Okay.
the gist of the book is you cannot really have a co-managed or a self-managed organization, which, as you probably know, is a movement, self-management,
Mhm.
um, and without actually having co-ownership. So the gist of the book is that a lot of organizations are going around and saying, oh, let's move to holacracy, sociocracy, to teal companies, to all of this stuff. But we're going to leave the structure of the organization as the single owner or the absentee owners, that run the organization and make all the
Yeah,
decisions, right?
they're directing. Yeah.
So co-ownership and co-management we see as the future of co-ops. The reason we see that as the future of co-ops because a traditional organization doesn't actually have the ability to transition to a co-owned organization easily,
Yeah.
right?
100%. Yeah.
And they can't also transition to a co-management model,
Mhm.
right? And I like to call it a collaborative, which is an organization that is co-owned and co-managed, where from the beginning it's peer-to-peer, from the start of the organization, every individual plays a role in organizing their work and organizing their teams and doing all of the decisions that are need to be made
Mhm.
within the context of whatever they're touching.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, I've been doing a book review that we upload to YouTube for about 10 years now. So we're gonna review your book.
Well,
Uh,
that's awesome.
yeah, we're gonna
I'd
review your
love to
book.
hear
We're
that.
gonna and review your book. And put it. But yeah,
It's not
it's
well written, by the way, but
no. Yeah, I'm
it's the
sure it is.
ideas, not the writing.
No, no, no. We're gonna do it. We just finished reviewing Yanis Varoufakis's book, Techno Feudalism. So, we apply everything from the idea of, you could say cooperatives, but really within the language that you are using, things that are worker owned, anti-exploitative.
Right.
Um, and so that's something we're passionate about. So good. We'll do that. And I think, yeah, the Democracy at Work book with Richard Wolff, he seems to overlap the worker directed. He seems to overlap with that. He does kind of some of the same things that what I was mentioning earlier. It's like, well, if you want to have a hierarchy, go ahead and do it. It'd be best if you didn't. Right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Get as flat as possible, peer to peer. Some of the things I'd like, I don't know how much where we're at with time, but some of the things I'd like, maybe if we ever, do another one of these, getting into the open source community's view. It's quite paradoxical. Within an open source community where everyone is developing the code, you can't tell someone what to do. They can create whatever code. Oh, but they gravitate towards hierarchies, benevolent dictators, and so on and so forth. So this has been studied, and it's something I'm passionate about talking about, and trying to advocate for them to do things where it's less hierarchical.
So, okay, I don't usually say this on air, but I'm going to do it on air, which is to say I'd like to have you back,
Mm,
and I'd like to have you back to talk about something that we're working on. We're working on an open protocols platform.
okay,
It's
sure.
open source, and
Mhm,
the intention is to build an open platform for protocols that think of protocols as the human software,
sure. Yeah.
right? So we use protocols all the time,
Mhm,
unwritten ones. How do we say hello to each other? When is it appropriate to hug each other? When is it appropriate to kiss each other? We have all those protocols, right? They're all
yeah.
built in. We've picked them up over our
Yeah.
lifetimes.
Yeah.
But then we've taken many of our organizational protocols and we formalize them in legal terms rather than human terms.
Okay.
So we have contracts, we have operating agreements, we have founders agreements, and so on and so forth that have taken it away from the individual.
Mhm,
So
yeah.
it's the negotiation between the owners that get to make the founders agreement, right? And
Mhm,
we have involved lawyers and all that kind of stuff. What we think, we need something like open protocols to be able to actually provide the means for peer-to-peer collaboration, where individuals adopt a protocol, just like we do in code, just like you just described.
mhm,
I want to do this and I want to work with that library and I want to work with that library.
mhm.
And as a developer has the right to and the ability to make those decisions, um, to be able to do that. So come back, let's have that conversation. Let's talk a little bit, geek out a little bit more
Sure.
about the structure of open source as you described,
Mhm,
and the opportunities there to
mhm.
work in ways that are more consistent with what I think is a shared ethos between what you guys and you espouse and the conversation that we've had today. Our time
100%.
has come
Yeah.
to wrap it up. I'm
Mhm,
going to introduce next week's guest. We have Adrian Roman of Roman Ventures. We're going to be talking about cultivating cooperative cultures, which is exactly down the path of our conversation. And that's next week, Wednesday, December 18th. So please join us. I've had a couple of great conversations with Adrian and look forward to having them in the public domain and on here on the podcast, and look forward to having a conversation next year with you, Watson, following up on this one and going a little bit more in depth into what we were talking about today. Carlos is going to be happy because we're wrapping it up at 40 minutes. So I'm glad to see that. Thank you so much, Watson. I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have too. And I look forward to following up in the new year.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Cheers.
Mhm.